Have you ever wondered what happens when someone who has been strong for too long suddenly breaks down? And in that fragile moment, your name is the one that escapes their lips? Imagine this scene for a moment. It's late. The room's quiet. Someone notices that this person has been acting strange for a while. Maybe quieter than usual, maybe distracted, maybe carrying a heaviness that no one could quite explain. They ask a simple question. Are you okay? At first, the person shrugs it off. They smile weakly. They say everything is fine. But then the silence grows heavier. Their eyes begin to fill with tears. They were trying so hard to hold back. Their voice shakes. And suddenly, the emotional wall they built for weeks, maybe even months, begins to crack. They break down. Not the kind of breakdown people show online for sympathy. A real one. The kind that happens when the heart has been holding too much for too long. Words start spilling out. Confessions they never planned to say. Feelings they promised themselves they would keep hidden forever. And then something unexpected happens. In the middle of that emotional storm, your name appears. According to Carl Jung, moments like this are incredibly revealing about the human psyche. Jung believed that our conscious mind is only a small part of who we are. Beneath it lies the unconscious mind, a vast hidden world that stores our true emotions, memories, and unresolved feelings. During normal moments, the conscious mind acts like a gatekeeper. It filters what we say. It protects our ego. It stops us from revealing things that might make us look vulnerable. But when someone experiences an emotional breakdown, that gatekeeper becomes weak. The conscious mind loses control, and the unconscious begins speaking. This is why people sometimes say things during emotional moments that even surprise themselves. It's not that the thought appeared suddenly. It's that the truth was always there, waiting beneath the surface. Jung described this as the psyche revealing what has been repressed. Repression happens when someone pushes feelings away because they are too painful, too confusing, or too complicated to deal with directly. But repression doesn't erase emotions. It only hides them temporarily. Think of it like pushing a ball underwater. You can hold it down for a while, but the pressure keeps building, and eventually it bursts back to the surface. When that person broke down, something similar likely happened. All the emotions they had been suppressing began rising at once. And among all those emotions, the image connected to you surfaced. That is why your name appeared. Because in that moment of emotional honesty, the unconscious revealed who was truly occupying space inside their heart and mind. This doesn't necessarily mean the situation is simple. Human emotions rarely are. The feelings connected to you might include love, regret, longing, confusion, or unfinished conversations that never reached their proper ending. Jung believed that some relationships leave what he called psychic imprints. These are emotional marks left on the psyche when a connection deeply affects someone's inner world. Not every relationship creates this kind of imprint. Some people pass through our lives without changing us. But others, even if they stay for a short time, touch something deeper inside our psyche. They activate parts of ourselves we didn't know existed. And when that happens, the unconscious remembers them long after the relationship changes or ends. This is why people sometimes move on easily from certain connections, yet struggle for years to fully release others. The psyche keeps returning to what remains unresolved. When someone breaks down emotionally and speaks a name without planning to, Jung would say that the unconscious has chosen to reveal the truth the conscious mind was trying to hide. But here's the fascinating part. Often the person themselves doesn't fully understand why they feel this way. They might have spent weeks telling themselves they were over everything, convincing themselves they didn't care anymore, distracting themselves with new routines, new people, new goals. But the unconscious doesn't operate according to logic or pride. It operates according to emotional reality. And emotional reality has a way of revealing itself at the most unexpected moments. The person who witnessed the breakdown probably saw something very raw and very real. They may have realized that your name carried a weight that other names did not. A pause in the voice. A shift in emotion. A deeper tone of sadness or longing. In Jungian psychology, this suggests that your presence in that person's life activated something powerful inside their psyche. Something that didn't fully resolve when the relationship changed. But the story doesn't end with the breakdown. Because according to Jung, what happens after someone reveals a hidden emotional truth can be even more important than the moment itself. Sometimes that confession becomes the beginning of deep self-reflection. A moment where the person starts confronting feelings they have been avoiding for a long time. And when that process begins, the psyche starts moving towards something Jung called transformation. But before that transformation happens, the person must face an uncomfortable realization about what your presence truly means inside their inner world. After that emotional breakdown ended, the room probably became very quiet. The person who was listening might have been shocked, not because people cry, but because the truth that came out was deeper than expected. When someone accidentally reveals a name during such an intense moment, it usually means that name carries a powerful emotional weight inside their psyche. According to Carl Jung, the unconscious mind does not randomly choose what it reveals during emotional collapse. Instead, it brings forward what the person has been avoiding the most. For weeks or months, this person likely tried to convince themselves that they had moved on. They may have repeated the same sentence in their mind again and again. It doesn't matter anymore. It's over. I'm fine. And on the surface, they might have looked perfectly normal. Laughing with friends. Posting things online. Acting as if life had already continued forward. But the unconscious mind has a different memory system than the conscious one. It doesn't forget emotional experiences easily, especially when those experiences were meaningful, intense, or unfinished. Jung believed that unfinished emotional stories were made alive inside the psyche because the mind constantly searches for closure. Think about it like a book that suddenly ends before the final chapter. The reader keeps thinking about how the story should have ended. The imagination keeps returning to it. The same thing happens inside the human psyche. When an emotional connection ends without full understanding or resolution, the unconscious keeps replaying it, trying to understand what it meant. That might be exactly what has been happening inside this person. Even if they tried to bury the memories, the emotional imprint remained active. And when the pressure finally became too heavy, the truth slipped out in the most vulnerable moment possible. Your name was not just a word in that moment. It was a symbol connected to an entire emotional world stored inside their mind. Memories, conversations, moments of closeness, confusion, perhaps even regrets about things that were never said or done. In Jungian psychology, a person who triggers such deep emotions can become what Jung described as a psychological projection. Projection happens when someone unconsciously attaches parts of their inner world onto another person. For example, someone might see another person as the symbol of love, healing, excitement, or even emotional safety. Sometimes they project their hopes onto that person. Sometimes they project the parts of themselves they don't fully understand yet. This is why certain relationships feel unusually powerful or difficult to forget. The connection is not only between two people, it is also between the person and their own unconscious mind. The other person becomes a mirror, reflecting something deeper inside them. If this person spoke your name during their breakdown, it may mean that you represent something very meaningful in their inner world. Perhaps you represent a version of themselves they were discovering when they were around you. Perhaps you represent a time in their life when they felt more alive, more understood, or more emotionally open. Or perhaps you represent an emotional lesson they have not yet fully processed. Jung believed that these kinds of connections often appear during periods of psychological transformation. When someone is changing internally, they often encounter people who trigger strong emotional reactions, because those people activate parts of the psyche that were previously unconscious. But here is where the story becomes even more interesting. After someone reveals a hidden emotional truth, their mind cannot easily go back to pretending everything is normal. The confession creates awareness, and awareness changes the inner landscape of the psyche. Now this person may find themselves thinking about you even more than before, not because the feelings suddenly appeared, but because the wall that was hiding them has cracked. They may start replaying the moment of the breakdown in their mind, wondering why your name came out so naturally, questioning what it means about their true emotions. Jung believed these moments force people to confront parts of themselves they were trying to avoid. The psyche begins asking difficult questions. Why does this person still matter to me? What unfinished emotion am I carrying? What part of myself did this relationship awaken? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are also the beginning of psychological growth. Because according to Jung, real self-understanding only begins when someone stops running away from their own emotions. And when someone finally faces those emotions honestly, the path toward transformation begins to open. But there is still one deeper reason why your name might have appeared during that breakdown. A reason Jung connected to something much more mysterious inside the human psyche. Something that explains why certain people seem impossible to forget, no matter how much time passes. Now we arrive at the deepest layer of what may have happened in that moment. According to Carl Jung, the human psyche is not only shaped by memories and emotions, but also by powerful unconscious patterns called archetypes. Archetypes are universal psychological forces that influence how people experience love, attachment, longing, and emotional bonds. Jung believes that when someone enters our life and activates one of these archetypes, the connection can feel unusually powerful, sometimes even impossible to forget. This is why certain people remain in our thoughts long after the relationship itself has changed. It's not just about the person anymore. It's about what they represent inside our inner world. When this person broke down emotionally and your name came out, it may have revealed that you represent something very significant in their unconscious mind. Perhaps you became connected to the image of what Jung called the anima, or animus. In Jungian psychology, the anima represents the inner feminine image within a man's unconscious, while the animus represents the inner masculine image within a woman's unconscious. These archetypes influence how people experience attraction and emotional connection. When someone meets a person who strongly reflects that inner image, the bond can feel incredibly meaningful, almost as if the relationship carries psychological depth that goes beyond ordinary attraction. The person may not consciously understand why they feel so drawn or emotionally affected, but the unconscious recognizes the archetypal connection immediately. That is why the feelings can remain strong, even when logic says they should fade away. In moments of emotional honesty, like the breakdown we are talking about, the unconscious sometimes reveals the person connected to that archetypal image. And that may be exactly why your name appeared. Because somewhere inside their psyche, you became part of a deeper emotional pattern that they haven't fully understood yet. But Jung also believed that these moments are not only about attachment to another person, they are also about self-discovery. When someone experiences such intense emotions connected to another person, it often means that relationships awaken parts of their own personality that were previously hidden. Perhaps they felt more vulnerable with you than with anyone else. Perhaps they discovered emotions they didn't know they were capable of feeling. Perhaps they confronted fears, desires, or dreams that had been sleeping inside them for years. In that sense, your presence may have acted like a mirror, reflecting parts of themselves they were only beginning to understand. And when that mirror suddenly disappears or changes, the psyche struggles to adjust. That is why emotional breakdowns can happen long after the relationship itself has shifted. The unconscious is still trying to process what the connection meant, still trying to understand why that person left such a powerful imprint on the inner world. But there is another important truth Jung often emphasized. Emotional breakdowns, even painful ones, are sometimes the beginning of psychological transformation. When someone finally stops suppressing their emotions and faces them honestly, the psyche begins reorganizing itself. The person starts learning something about their own emotional needs, their attachments, and their inner patterns. They may begin questioning why certain relationships affected them so deeply. They may begin understanding their own shadow, the hidden parts of themselves they previously ignored. And slowly, through that process, they grow into a more aware version of themselves. That is what Jung called individuation, the journey toward becoming a more complete and conscious human being. And sometimes, the people who appear during this journey play very important roles in that transformation. Even if the relationship itself does not follow the path people originally imagined, because certain connections are not only about romance or companionship. Some connections exist to awaken something inside the psyche, to force someone to confront deeper truths about themselves. So when someone breaks down emotionally, and your name appears during that moment, it may reveal something profound. It may show that your presence in their life touched a layer of their psyche they cannot easily ignore. A layer connected to memory, meaning, and psychological growth. The real question now is not simply why your name appeared, but what that moment will change inside them moving forward. Because once the unconscious reveals the truth, it becomes very difficult for the mind to hide from it again. And sometimes, that single moment of honesty becomes the beginning of a transformation that reshapes how a person understands themselves, their emotions, and the connections that truly mattered in their life.